You know that heavy, quiet kind of exhaustion that settles in your chest after years of trying to make something work. The kind that comes from walking on eggshells, from rewriting your own memories, from constantly asking yourself what you could have done differently to keep the peace. You have spent so much energy explaining yourself, softening your words, and adjusting your reality just to avoid conflict. And then, one day, something shifts. Not because of a loud argument or a dramatic revelation, but because a quiet clarity finally breaks through the fog. You stop questioning your own perception. You stop trying to fix a dynamic that was never meant to be fixed. You realize, with a steady and almost unsettling calm, that the problem was never your sensitivity, your boundaries, or your need for honesty. The problem was a pattern designed to keep you uncertain. And the moment you stop playing your assigned role in that pattern, everything changes. They notice. Not because you announced it, but because the energy you once fed into the relationship is gone. You have stopped performing confusion. You have stopped accepting blame. You have started seeing the structure clearly. And that is exactly when they know you have figured them out. This is not about you becoming cold or unfeeling. It is about you becoming clear. The psychology behind this shift is straightforward. Relationships built on emotional control depend on a steady exchange of attention, reassurance, and emotional reaction. When you are deeply invested in making things work, you naturally respond to their moods, their criticisms, their sudden withdrawals, and their occasional moments of warmth. Your engagement becomes the fuel that keeps the dynamic alive. But the moment you recognize the pattern, your engagement changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop defending yourself against false accusations. You stop trying to prove your loyalty through sacrifice. That quiet withdrawal of emotional reactivity is what they feel first. They do not need you to say anything out loud. They only need to notice that the old triggers no longer work. Your calm becomes the loudest signal you could possibly send. When that shift happens, their first response is often a subtle but noticeable change in how they approach you. You may notice them testing the waters with familiar tactics just to see if the old system still responds. They might bring up old grievances, frame themselves as the misunderstood one, or suddenly act unusually attentive. This is not a genuine attempt at connection. It is a psychological recalibration. People who rely on control and emotional dominance are highly attuned to shifts in power. When they sense that you are no longer reacting to guilt, pressure, or manufactured urgency, they feel the loss of leverage. The behavior you see in those moments is simply their way of checking whether the dynamic can be reset. They will often start small. A carefully worded comment designed to trigger doubt. A sudden request for emotional support that requires you to step back into the caretaker role. A subtle reminder of how much you supposedly owe them. These are not random. They are calibrated attempts to pull you back into the familiar cycle. And when you watch it happen without stepping into the trap, you will feel a strange mix of clarity and exhaustion. You will recognize the pattern, but your nervous system will still remember what it felt like to be caught in it. That is normal. Recognition takes time to settle into your bones. As the realization deepens, the testing often becomes more obvious. This is the phase where they may escalate their efforts to regain control. Not through open confrontation, but through confusion. You might experience sudden criticism after a period of calm, or an unexpected emotional withdrawal when you finally start setting simple boundaries. They might introduce third parties into conversations, hint at outside opinions, or reframe your reasonable requests as unreasonable demands. The psychology here is rooted in preservation of the self-image they depend on. When someone builds their sense of stability on being the reasonable one, the misunderstood one, or the one who holds all the answers, your clarity feels like a threat. It is not a threat to their safety. It is a threat to their narrative. To protect that narrative, they will often project uncertainty onto you. They will frame your boundaries as cruelty, your silence as punishment, and your clarity as stubbornness. This is how emotional imbalance maintains itself. It shifts the focus away from the behavior and onto your reaction to it. And because you have spent so long trying to be fair, trying to be understanding, trying to keep things stable, you may initially absorb that projection. You may wonder if you are being too rigid, if you are misreading the situation, if you are the one who has changed for the worse. But you have not changed for the worse. You have simply stopped carrying the weight of their emotional regulation. It is important to understand that their reaction to your clarity is never about truth. It is about control. When you stop feeding the cycle, the system has to adjust. People who depend on emotional dominance do not suddenly develop self-awareness when their influence fades. They experience it as a loss, and loss triggers defense. That defense often looks like blame shifting, sudden coldness, manufactured crises, or an attempt to rewrite recent history. You will notice them speaking as if you are the unpredictable one, as if your steady boundaries are the source of the tension. They may act offended by your calm. They may treat your refusal to engage in circular arguments as a personal rejection. This is not a reflection of your behavior. It is a reflection of their dependence on a dynamic where you absorb the confusion so they do not have to face it. The moment you step out of that role, they are forced to sit with the reality they have been avoiding. Most people in this position cannot sit with it. They will deflect, distract, or withdraw. And when they do, it is easy to mistake their reaction for proof that you made a mistake. But it is not. It is proof that the old arrangement is over. You will know you have truly figured them out, not when they change, but when you stop expecting them to. That is the quiet turning point. You stop waiting for the apology that will never come. You stop hoping they will suddenly see the pattern from your perspective. You stop measuring your worth by their willingness to acknowledge it. This is where emotional independence begins. It does not feel dramatic. It feels like a slow exhale after years of holding your breath. You start noticing how much energy you have been spending on managing their moods, predicting their reactions, and editing yourself to avoid conflict. You realize that peace is not something you negotiate with someone who depends on your uncertainty. Peace is something you reclaim by refusing to participate in the game anymore. That refusal is not aggressive. It is simply consistent. You answer questions directly. You decline unreasonable requests without over-explaining. You do not justify your boundaries. You state them, and you follow through. The simplicity of it is what makes it effective. Control systems rely on complexity, guilt, and emotional fog. Calm consistency cuts through all of it. As you hold that consistency, you will notice a shift in how you carry yourself. The mental exhaustion begins to lift. The constant background anxiety of wondering what you said wrong or how you will be perceived starts to fade. You stop rehearsing conversations before they happen. You stop analyzing every text message for hidden meanings. You begin to trust your own perception again. That trust is the foundation of everything that follows. Without it, you will keep returning to the cycle, hoping this time will be different. With it, you can see the pattern clearly, and you can choose differently. You will make mistakes along the way. You might slip into old habits of over-explaining or defending yourself. You might feel a sudden wave of guilt when they act hurt or disappointed. That is not failure. That is your nervous system unlearning years of conditioning. Give yourself time. Clarity is not a switch. It is a practice. And every time you choose calm over confusion, truth over compliance, and self-respect over appeasement, you reinforce the new pattern. The most important realization in this process is that their awareness of your clarity does not give them power over you. It actually marks the end of their influence. Once you see the mechanism, you cannot unknow it. You will still encounter moments of doubt, especially when they deploy familiar tactics with precision. You will still feel the pull of old loyalty, the weight of shared history, the lingering hope that the person you once cared about is still in there somewhere. But hope does not require you to abandon your own reality. You can care about someone and still recognize that the dynamic was harmful. You can acknowledge their pain and still refuse to absorb it. You can wish them well and still keep your distance. Emotional maturity is not about cutting off all feeling. It is about directing your energy toward what actually sustains you. And what sustains you is truth, consistency, and respect for your own boundaries. You will notice that as you step back emotionally, your interactions become simpler. You no longer need to decode hidden meanings because there are none. You no longer need to brace for sudden shifts in tone because you are no longer participating in the emotional economy that required them. You start responding to what is actually said, not to what you fear might be implied. This is where calm detachment lives. It is not indifference, it is clarity. It is the ability to observe behavior without absorbing it, to acknowledge patterns without being pulled into them, to speak your truth without needing the other person to validate it. Calm detachment is not something you achieve by forcing yourself to feel nothing. It is something you develop by refusing to carry what is not yours. You stop taking responsibility for their emotional state. You stop trying to manage their perception of you. You stop editing your reality to keep them comfortable. And in that space, your own mind finally gets quiet. The path forward does not require you to prove anything. It does not require you to announce your realization, to write a detailed explanation, or to demand accountability from someone who is not equipped to give it. Healing is not a performance. It is a quiet rebuilding. You start by trusting your own observations again. You start by honoring your exhaustion instead of pushing through it. You start by recognizing that your need for consistency, honesty, and emotional safety was never too much. It was simply mismatched with a system that could not provide it. That mismatch is not your fault. It is a structural reality. Some people are not capable of mutual accountability. Some people are not capable of sitting with discomfort without making someone else carry it. Recognizing that does not make you bitter. It makes you accurate. And accuracy is the first step toward peace. As you continue to move forward, you will find that your relationships begin to change naturally. You will attract people who do not require you to shrink yourself to feel comfortable. You will notice how much easier communication becomes when it is not layered with hidden expectations or manufactured urgency. You will stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You will stop mistaking anxiety for connection. You will start valuing steadiness over drama, consistency over occasional warmth, and mutual respect over one-sided sacrifice. These are not high standards. They are basic requirements for emotional health. And when you finally treat them as non-negotiable, everything else falls into place. You stop wondering why people treat you a certain way. You start paying attention to what people show you, and you adjust your proximity accordingly. That is not manipulation. That is self-preservation. That is maturity. That is how you protect your peace without having to fight for it. The closure you are looking for will not come from them. It will come from you, deciding that your clarity is enough. You do not need their admission to validate your experience. You do not need their apology to release the weight you have been carrying. You only need your own steady acknowledgement that what happened was real, that your exhaustion was justified, and that your decision to step back was not an overreaction. It was a necessary correction. You spent so long trying to make a broken system work that you forgot to ask whether it was worth working at all. Now you remember, and remembering changes how you move through the world. You walk lighter. You speak slower. You stop rushing to fix things that are not yours to fix. You stop accepting chaos as proof of passion. You stop confusing control with care. You begin to recognize that true connection does not require you to abandon yourself. It requires you to show up fully, honestly, and without fear of losing your ground. There will still be days when the memory of what you endured feels heavy. There will still be moments when you question whether you handled things correctly, whether you could have been kinder, whether you gave up too soon. That is the residue of years of conditioning. It does not mean you are wrong. It means you are human. Be patient with yourself. Healing is not linear. It is a series of small choices to return to your own side. Every time you choose truth over convenience, every time you honor your boundary instead of negotiating it away, every time you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, you rebuild the foundation you were taught to doubt. That foundation is stronger than you realize. It has been waiting for you to stop questioning it and start standing on it. You do not need to announce your healing. You do not need to prove your growth to anyone who was invested in your confusion. You only need to live it. Let your calm be your answer. Let your consistency be your closure. Let your quiet refusal to return to the old dynamic be the final statement you ever need to make. You were never the problem. You were simply the person who finally stopped pretending the problem did not exist. And that realization is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a life where you no longer have to earn the right to trust yourself. Where peace is not something you negotiate, but something you claim. Where clarity is not a burden, but a compass. You have already done the hardest part. You saw the pattern. You named it. You stepped out of it. Now you simply keep walking. One steady, quiet step at a time. And with every step, the weight lifts. The fog clears. The space around you opens up. And you finally breathe.